how the did we get here? To the least affordable real estate market in U.S. history. Was it bad policy? Maybe. Was it unforeseen events like the pandemic? Maybe. Probably both. Now, today we're going to start our story in 2020 because 2020 was a pivotal moment to getting to where we are. But you can rest assured this fiasco probably started decades before because the government has been printing and overspending and adding to its debt for decades. But we're going to start in 2020 because it is complicated enough as it is. There are many moving parts, and what I want to do in this video is give you a better idea of how we got here. I want to pull together all the different moving parts that got us in the situation that we are today. So if you can't afford a house, I want you to listen up because this is the reason why. If you can't afford your rent, I want you to listen up because this is the reason why. Or if just plain and simple, you believe that the real estate market is overpriced, because it is, I want you to listen up because these are the reasons why. Let's get right into it. As always, my name is Derek and I got my degree in finance, so you don't have to. I want to start this video by apologizing if my voice sounds awful. I am recovering from a small flu, so please bear with me. Okay, let's get right into it. 2020 happened. Now, I'm not here to talk politics and I'm not here to argue about policies. What I'm here to do is state facts. And the fact of the matter is 2020 happened and we could not foresee that. At least that's what we're told. Now, because of 2020, the US government had to respond. Now, there are many ways that it could respond, but it responded with what we must assume was what they thought was the best way to respond at the time, which was to print insurmountable amounts of money and add a whopping $4 trillion to the national debt in 2020 alone. Right? It's a huge, insane number. That is more than most countries' GDPs per year. We added in 1 year, mostly for relief, right? For COVID relief. I don't even know if I can say that word here on YouTube. For COVID relief or pandemic relief. That basically put money into people's pockets. Those were the relief payments. It also put money into businesses' pockets to not fire people and to keep people on their payroll because the government was afraid that the economy was going to collapse. Now, I'm not here to talk about whether that was the right move or not. I don't think any of us can fully know for certain if there were better policy options. The fact of the matter is that's what happened, plain and simple. Now, when you print a shit ton of money, and when you add a shit ton of money or debt to the national debt, you're going to have consequences. The thing is, and what's interesting to see is, in 2020, most people were asking for more money. Most people were asking for more relief payments. I'm sure you remember. We got a $750 payment, etc., based on income. I think we got a couple of those. There was also a child tax credit. There was all kinds of things. People were asking for more money. Fine. I understand that at the time, people were struggling, businesses were struggling, everything was shut down, and you had supply chain issues, up the woozah. The point is, we printed a ton of money as it is, and if we would have printed more money, we would be suffering worse consequences, which is unbelievable already, than we are right now. Because of 2020, the exact problems that we are facing in the real estate market and because of with inflation are directly correlated to the amount of money that we printed and the amount of debt that we added to the national debt in 2020. When you add to money supply, inflation increases. When you add money to the circulation, there is more demand, because when more people have more money, you have more demand. And this is where we get to the next part of the equation, both for the general economy, and then we will touch on real estate because they are very similar, okay? You gave people a bunch of money during COVID as the government. Those people then saved at very high levels, some of the highest levels we've ever had in regards to consumer saving. Why? Because there was nowhere to spend money, right? So you have a bunch of people saving a bunch of money. You have the government injecting a bunch of money into the economy, okay? And then on the other, so that's the demand side. And then on the other side, on the supply side, you have low demand during COVID because there was nowhere to go, there was nowhere to spend money, and everyone was cooped up inside. So you had people cutting supply chain. You had people shutting down supply chain and shrinking supply chain. So you have lowering supply to deal with the lowering demand. The thing is, and it's hard to foresee these things, but 2021, 2022 happened and the economy started to open up again and people were able to spend money again. So you had all this pent up demand that had to go somewhere. And not only did you have pent up demand, but you had pent up demand from consumers with extra money in their savings. So now you have demand flooding the market for goods as well as houses. We will touch on houses because this is a real estate video, but I have to set the scene here. So you had all this demand flooding the market. Yet on the supply side, you had limited supply because people shut down supply chain. That's why you had issues with extremely high car prices, which we're still dealing with. Now, if you remember, in the real estate sector, because of these supply chain issues, whether they were shut down or whether they were just disrupted because of COVID, lumber at one point was like 400 to 500% higher than average. Lumber is used in real estate building. So you had this supply chain issue. So when demand came back on the market, builders had higher prices to build. So they had what? Higher cost of goods sold. Not only that, let's go back again to 2020 and 2021 because, like I said, this is complex. So we're going to do a lot of fast forwarding and rewinding to kind of set the stage for you. Okay. In 2020, separate issue. People were forced to work from home. Now, at the time, everyone thought it would be temporary, but as time progressed, it seemed to not be so temporary, and we're at a point where people prefer, for the most part, if they're able, to work from home. When 2020 hit, people were in apartments or people were in houses that they were not accustomed to spending so much time in. So let's say you had a family of 3 and you had a 1,000 square foot house, and it wasn't that big of a deal because 98% of the time, Monday through Friday, people were out of the house and there was only 1 or 2 people at the house at a time until dinner time. Fast forward to 2020, and everyone's forced to work from home. Now you have all family members, especially even children weren't able to go to school for a while. So you have all these people stuck in 1,000 square feet at a time. People start looking for bigger houses, for more space. And then people in apartments also want houses because they were fine in apartments, but now that they're forced to be there day in and day out, they want yards. They want more space. They want a home office, etc. So again, you have more demand, not enough supply. That is why in 2020, 2021, instead of having this massive crash in the economy and this massive crash in real estate in specifics, you didn't, okay? Now fast forward just a little bit. 2021 happens, 2022 happens, and this demand for real estate is still at all-time highs. On top of that, you have no supply. 1, because everyone is frantically trying to buy houses. 2, because there has been underbuilding for the last probably way longer than COVID, but we're going to say from 2020, there's been a huge underbuilding of real estate. So you have this massive amount of demand in 2021 and 2022, and you do not have enough houses. Okay, this is before we even start to get into the fight against inflation, which is what happened because of all the spending in 2020. Okay, so before we even get to the fight against inflation, you already have extreme demand, right? And not enough supply, which is why in 2020 and 2021 mostly, when interest rates were still low, you still had houses that were insane amounts of money. Houses that before the pandemic were way less. In fact, there's a statistic that houses after the pandemic were 43% higher than in 2019. Right? And that's before you factor in high inflation. So you already have all this, you already have all these issues. Now 2021, 2022 starts to happen and the Fed starts to realize, oh shit, now we're going to have to deal with inflation. Oh shit, we have all this demand and not enough supply because of logistical issues and because of supply chain issues, that you have more demand than supply. What happens to prices? They go up. That's common, simple economics. So now, 2021, around the end of 2021, the Fed starts to raise interest rates. So when we move it back to the real estate sector, you already have limited supply. You have so many people who want to work from home, and you have people who just want to. And not only that, you have this millennial wave because the millennials are getting to that buying age of real estate. So you have all these factors, and now you have inflation. Inflation that at one point was 9%. 9% in the United States. That's unheard of. Usually it's, what does the Fed want? It wants 2%, right? Roughly 2 to 2.5% is the target rate for inflation. So you have inflation that's 3 or 4 times that. So obviously, I mean, and the fact of the matter is, these people who lead the country and these people who steer the economy are supposed to be the brightest minds, are supposed to be the most well-educated people. It's pretty common knowledge in economics that if you print a fuck ton of money, you're going to have consequences a year to 2 years to 3 years later. It's the same as when you pour water on the dirt, it gets wet. I mean, it shouldn't be rocket science. The point is, the Fed, like usual, acts too little, too late, and you have crazy inflation. So they start increasing interest rates, and they have to. This is a common problem with the Fed. When interest rates rise, they tend, when you look at history, they tend to act a little bit too late, and they do too little to fix it. So you have inflation going here, and when the Fed should have acted, they didn't, and they finally act, okay? And they finally act, and they have to raise interest rates tremendously to bring down inflation. Okay, fine. The Fed is doing its job, and it's trying to fight inflation. But when they raise interest rates rise across the board, and that also means in the real estate market. So you have too much demand, not enough supply, and now you throw in interest rates that are way higher than people are accustomed to. So that's where we are today. You have this real estate market where if you want to buy a house, not only are you going to get outbid, even if you offer market price for the house, there's a chance that you're going to get outbid even in today's market. On top of that, you're dealing with 7% plus interest rates. And on top of that, you'd assume that, okay, well, if no one can afford houses, the prices should be coming down. But they're not, because there is no supply. And the people who should be adding to supply don't. Because the people who have mortgages, there's something like 25% of people have a mortgage less than 3%. That's 1 in 4 houses have a mortgage less than 3%. You think those people want to sell their house to then get in a mortgage that's close to 8%? Absolutely not. Even if their income has risen, which I guarantee you for most people it hasn't. But even if their income has risen, they cannot afford more house because the interest rates are so much higher than they are accustomed to. So you basically just eliminate 25% of available housing, because the people with 3% and less mortgages are not going to list their house. Very few of them are. Even if they have a ton of equity, they cannot afford more houses. So you have a fourth of the market off the board. Then you have supply chain issues and supply that we're not supply chain issues, but supply in the real estate, because there is an underbuilding right now. Builders are starting to fill the gaps and they're starting to build, but it is not enough. There are too many home buyers for every house that's out there, which is why you're getting these scenarios where you get 1, 2, 3, 4 bids at market or above, even with the interest rates that we have right now. So all in all, when you put all that together, you end up with this extreme unaffordability that we're facing. Not only this, I've touched on this in other videos, but I want to touch on this again because it's fascinating and it's unfortunate. But about 50% of the population, there's an estimate that about 50% of the U.S. population cannot afford a house above $250,000. Yet the average home price in the United States is above $400,000. So you have this feeding frenzy, as I've said before, in the lower portion of the market. In the starter home or affordable home market, which is, let's say, $300,000 and below, you have a feeding frenzy there. Yet you have builders who are not building really in that sector of the market because they have to cover their costs because of supply chain issues, because their cost of goods sold is still higher. Not only because of their materials, but because guess what? Builders also take out loans. And when their loans are close to 8%, they have to recoup that money. So the house building that is going on and the real estate developers that are developing tend to be skewing towards the upper side of the market because they want to recoup their funds. Yet you're skewing yourself to a portion of the market where not a lot of people can afford houses. So what does this do? This lower end of the market, $250,000 to $300,000, there is undersupply in that market and there's over demand because that's all people can afford. So because of that feeding frenzy, you have this basically increase of prices in the lower tier of the market. And when the lower tier of the market, when those prices increase, you would assume that the higher end of the market, if people cannot afford that, those prices would come down. They're not coming down because the people who own houses in that sector of the market have low interest rates, so they are not listing their house for sale. Okay? And on top of that, you have builders who just aren't building enough houses in general. So when you put all that together, you end up with where we're at. Now, this story, like I said, starts way before 2020. But 2020, whether we like to believe it or not, was a pivotal moment in what we are experiencing economically right now. 2020 was a pivotal moment in all of our lives, and it changed economics. I don't want to say forever, but it changed the U.S. economy for the foreseeable future. Because when you look at 2010 to 2020, when you look at 2008 really to 2020, you had a market that was relatively functioning, I don't want to say perfectly, but it was functioning correctly. Things were moving in the correct direction. 2020 happened and all that was thrown out the window. And I'm not saying that the government hasn't been spending money for decades. It has, but it spent so much money in 2020. There's estimates out there that 50% of the money supply was printed in 2020 to now. 50% and above of the total US money supply was printed in the last 3 or 4 years. That is insane. And you're going to have issues and you're going to have problems. So again, I'm not here to talk politics, but I understand why there is this battle between the two. Really, it's between the two policy sides of public goods and printing money, and the other side saying, hey, you can't do that because there are consequences. There are consequences to both ends of the political spectrum and both ideologies. I guess in a sense, you have to pick your poison. Now, not only this, I also want to touch on, before I wrap this video up, I want to touch on the other side of the coin, which is home owners, people who already own homes. You have to understand that we're all American and we're all in this together, but there are always opposing people have a self-interest. So there are always opposing interests. You have home buyers who want homes to be more affordable. You have people who cannot afford homes, or people who are renting who want homes to be more affordable, or they want their rent to be less expensive. You have home owners, which are home buyers in the future, basically. You have home owners who, in a sense, have opposing interests because they do not want their home value to go down. And you have homeowners who potentially are renting their home or their second home, who also do not want rents to go down because that is a source of income for them. Again, I'm not here to say who's right and who's wrong. All I'm saying is that even with fellow Americans, there are always opposing beliefs. And these are the good people. These are your ordinary Americans. And even within them, there are opposing beliefs and opposing political beliefs. So when you start to extrapolate that to the elite, or to the 0.01%, or to the companies and the landowners and the government, you can understand and you can start to see how their interests might be very different from the average American. So we have all these, and I'm not saying what's right and what's wrong. I'm just saying that people play the cards that they are given. And when you have all these opposing beliefs, you have a difficulty moving policy forward. And even if for you or I, the solution might be simple: build more houses, right? There are opposing beliefs that keep that from happening, in a sense, because let's say you have a development that is, greenlit for home building, but you have existing home builder or homeowners around the area who own, let's say, much more expensive houses. They are going to lobby, in a sense, to their local government to not allow that to happen, because less expensive houses are going to lower the overall average value of the property in their area. And if they have houses that are 2 or 3 times more expensive than those houses that are going in, there's going to be conflicts of interest. So the point of the matter is 2020 happened and we are still experiencing the repercussions from that. When you print a ton of money, there are going to be consequences, period. When you add trillions upon trillions of dollars to our national debt, someone is going to have to pay that. And it is either going to be you or I, if you are, say, 40 and below, or it's going to be our children. But somebody is going to have to pay that. And there are going to have to be cuts somewhere, because printing money and adding to debt because there is a deficit is not sustainable for decades upon decades upon decades. For the entire U.S. history, we have been in debt in one way or another. There's only been a very short period of time where we were not in debt. But for the most part, the United States has been in debt, and we have grown our economy as such, and that works as long as the economy grows. When the economy does not grow, or there are periods of shrinkage, that's when things happen, and that's when debt shows its ugly head, and that's when you start having issues. The real estate market, the current place that we're in with the real estate market specifically, comes directly from the printing of money, from the overdemand, and from the undersupply that happened because of 2020. We are still feeling its effects, and we will see if we feel the effects into 2024 and beyond. Now, before I wrap this up, I want to hopefully offer a little bit of hope. And I'm going to make a video. The next video will most likely be on the future interest rate hikes. September 20th is coming up very soon, which is the next Fed meeting, and then we have the November meeting, and I want to touch on that in a separate video. But I do want to say this in this video. Interest rates should stop going up and should start coming down, hopefully in the next year. Inflation does seem to be getting under control. And the Fed has stated that while there might be 1 or 2 interest rate hikes needed, we're getting to the top of where interest rates are going to be. Now, if interest rates come down in the next 6 months to a year, that will be nothing but good for the real estate market, because it'll allow builders to build more, and it'll allow affordability to come down, and hopefully if builders have lower costs of goods sold, they can build more houses across the board in all levels of the market. And for you, hopefully that means that you'll have a lower monthly payment because your interest rate will be lower. And on top of all of that, it'll also allow the small, I don't even want to say small, the quarter section of the market who have interest rates below 3%. A lot of those people do want to sell their house and buy a different house. It'll allow that supply to come on market because those people will be able to afford the next interest rate payment. I don't know if it'll ever be under 3%, at least not for a while, but 5%, 4%, hopefully in the next coming year. Hopefully that's something we can all look forward to, as well as more home building because we need it. I hope I didn't ramble too much. I get passionate about these things because actions have consequences, whether they're positive or negative. And the thing that our government does, every single thing that our government does has consequences. And it is our duty as Americans and as world citizens to take notice and to be aware of those things because they affect us both politically and economically. And I think economically might be the more important of those two, because economics hurts or helps your pocket directly, your finances directly, and your future directly. So never stop learning finance. Never stop learning economics. Never stop trying to improve your personal finance knowledge or your personal finance abilities. And that's exactly what we want to do here on this channel. Personal finance, economics, and if you know me from Instagram, investing in the market has been my passion for over a decade. I got my degree in finance because I love this stuff and I love being able to share it with you guys. So I hope that you learned something from this video. I hope that you learned something from this channel. And if you haven't subscribed already, please feel free to do so you don't miss the next video. Make sure to turn on the bell notification so you don't miss the next video. Usually videos here are on Tuesdays, and sometimes we'll do a video on Thursday or Friday if there's a major economic news or financial thing that needs to be talked about. But usually videos here are on Tuesday. As always, my name is Derek. Again, I got my degree in finance. You don't have to. I love this stuff. I love being able to share this with you guys, and I love being able to discuss with you guys because, like I say, personal finance should be personal. And there are plenty of edited content out there on the internet, so I want to do something a little bit different. As you probably noticed, this was one-taked, although there is a lot of research that goes into these videos. I like to just have a conversation with you guys. I like to just keep this personal, have a conversation with you guys, and you guys can continue the conversation in the comments below. Again, my name is Derek. I love you guys. I'll see you in the next video. Hopefully, one day you'll be watching one of these videos in your new home. That's what we can all hope for. See ya.